You can hide your face, Elara, but not your heartbeat. Rowan's whisper disappeared beneath the solemn vows before anyone standing around the ancient altar could hear it. Only the woman beneath the ivory veil froze for the briefest instant. The High Chancellor continued reciting the royal ceremony, unaware that the Alpha King had recognized his supposed bride before she had spoken a single word. Around them, nobles watched with careful attention. If anyone discovered that the veiled woman was not Celeste Vale, the fragile peace treaty would collapse before sunset, and every rival delegation gathered inside the Grand Hall would leave believing the crown had deceived them. Elara steadied her breathing. Beneath layers of embroidered silk, her fingers brushed the small silver knife hidden inside her sleeve. She did not remove it. She simply confirmed it remained where she had placed it before entering the palace. Rowan noticed the slight movement but never looked down. Instead, he lifted his gaze toward the council members lining the marble walls. Several appeared less interested in the wedding than in the ancient ward crystals suspended above the ceremony. They were waiting for something besides a marriage. "Your Majesty," the High Chancellor announced, "present your hand." Rowan extended it without hesitation. Elara placed her gloved fingers upon his. To everyone watching, the gesture appeared perfectly formal. Only Rowan felt the familiar rhythm beneath her pulse, the same quiet determination that had carried her through exile, conspiracies, and 5 years of protecting their son. "Why are you here?" he murmured so softly that even the officiant could not distinguish the words. Without lifting her veil, Elara answered just as quietly. "Because 7 days of peace are worth 1 dangerous lie." Rowan understood immediately. Celeste had truly fled, and Elara had chosen to stand in her place not to honor a false marriage, but to prevent the treaty from shattering before they could expose whoever had forged it. The ceremony continued while musicians filled the silence between each vow. Across the hall, Finn watched from a private royal balcony under trusted protection, believing only that his parents were participating in another important meeting. Rowan had insisted the boy remain out of sight until the forged decree could be disproved. As the officiant reached the traditional blessing, a faint vibration traveled beneath the polished stone floor. One ward crystal flickered, then another. No guest seemed to notice except Rowan and Elara. She felt the tremor through the soles of her shoes. He saw the silver light pulse in an unnatural pattern he had witnessed only once before, deep beneath the throne room. Someone had disturbed an ancient seal below the palace. The High Chancellor raised the ceremonial scroll for the final declaration, but before he could speak, one elderly counselor narrowed his eyes toward the bride. "Your Majesty," he interrupted politely, "before we proceed, would your bride kindly remove her veil so the court may witness the face of Lady Celeste Vale?" The question hung beneath the vaulted ceiling like the edge of a drawn blade. "Would your bride kindly remove her veil?" the elderly counselor repeated, smiling with practiced courtesy while every noble in the grand hall turned toward the altar. Rowan answered before Elara could move. "According to the oldest northern tradition," he said evenly, "the veil remains until the final blessing is accepted by both houses." The High Chancellor hesitated. Several older governors quietly nodded. The custom did exist, although it had not been used in generations. The interruption was enough to delay the request without openly refusing it. Beneath the folds of white silk, Elara exhaled slowly. Rowan had bought them only minutes, not safety. She lightly pressed her thumb against the inside of his palm. 1 tap. 2. Pause. Their old field signals from years of investigating the forged contracts returned instinctively. "Danger from the council." Rowan answered by tightening his fingers once before releasing them. "I understand. Keep watching the ward." Neither of them looked at each other again. To every witness, they appeared to be quietly observing wedding protocol. Finn watched everything from the private balcony above. Hidden behind carved stone railings. With 2 trusted royal guardians nearby, he immediately recognized the familiar way his mother tilted her head whenever she concentrated. Even beneath the heavy veil, he knew it was her. One guardian leaned toward him with a gentle smile. "Do you know the bride?" Finn looked back toward the ceremony, then shook his head with remarkable composure. "She walks like someone who is very brave," he answered honestly, revealing nothing more. The guardian accepted the innocent reply without suspicion. Below, musicians filled another pause while diplomats exchanged uncertain glances. One foreign ambassador wearing the silver crest of the Eastern Alliance stepped forward from the front row. Unlike the counselors, he held no loyalty to palace traditions. "Your Majesty," he declared, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "my kingdom signed this peace believing the daughter of House Vale would stand before us openly. A hidden face invites hidden intentions." Murmurs spread through the assembled court. Several visiting nobles nodded in agreement. The ambassador bowed respectfully but did not retreat. For the treaty to remain beyond question, the veil should be lifted before every witness. Rowan remained outwardly calm, yet he noticed something the ambassador could not. The ward crystal nearest the altar flickered again, pulsing in the same uneven rhythm Elara had sensed moments earlier. Someone beneath the palace was disturbing ancient seals while the court's attention remained fixed upon the ceremony. Elara felt it as well. Her hidden hand brushed the small silver knife inside her sleeve, not from fear but because the vibration beneath the marble floor had grown stronger. She counted silently with every pulse. 3, 4, 5. Whatever lay beneath the throne was waking. The High Chancellor slowly reached toward the edge of Elara's veil. "If there is no objection," he announced, "the court shall now witness the bride." At that exact moment, the ancient ward beneath the altar gave a sharp metallic crack that echoed through the entire hall. The sharp crack beneath the altar silenced every conversation inside the grand hall. Before the High Chancellor's fingers could touch the edge of the bridal veil, Rowan lifted one hand. "The ceremony will pause," he declared. A chorus of confused voices rose from the assembled court, but Rowan continued before anyone could object. "The ancient marriage charter requires that if the sacred ward beneath the altar is disturbed during the rite of union, the couple must first complete the trial of truth. No vows spoken before the ward is judged can bind either house." Several elderly governors exchanged startled glances. The custom was nearly forgotten, yet none could deny it existed. The High Chancellor reluctantly lowered his hand. "Then the trial must proceed," he admitted. Rowan inclined his head respectfully. "Until the trial is complete, no veil may be lifted and no oath may be finalized." The declaration transformed suspicion into procedure. Instead of demanding the bride reveal herself, the court now had to obey its own oldest laws. As royal scholars hurried toward the ancient archives to prepare the forgotten ritual, Rowan stepped beside Elara just long enough to whisper, "Find Celeste. I'll keep them occupied." Without waiting for an answer, he turned toward the council and calmly began debating the legal requirements of the trial of truth with astonishing precision. Every question bought another precious minute. Hidden behind the protection of ceremony, Elara quietly slipped through a servant's corridor still wearing the ivory veil. Few people noticed the bride's absence because every eye remained fixed upon Rowan's legal argument. She reached the bridal chambers at the far end of the eastern wing and immediately sensed something was wrong. The heavy oak door stood slightly open. Inside, silk gowns had been thrown across the floor. Jewelry boxes lay overturned. Drawers had been emptied with methodical care rather than panic. Whoever searched the room had been looking for one specific object. Elara knelt beside the writing desk where scattered pages fluttered beneath an open window. Most contained harmless wedding preparations. One folded letter had become trapped beneath a fallen candlestick. She picked it up carefully before unfolding the brittle parchment. The message itself was frustratingly brief. "Run before sunset. Trust no royal seal." There was no signature. Yet the paper carried a faint scent that stopped Elara cold. Wolfsbane. Not enough to poison anyone, only enough to leave its unmistakable fragrance behind. She closed her eyes, remembering the counterfeit transport records from years earlier. The conspirators had disguised forged supplies using the very same scent to mislead investigators. This letter had not merely passed through their hands. It had been prepared by someone inside the same hidden network. As Elara slipped the parchment into her cloak, she noticed fresh scrape marks beneath the wardrobe. Pulling it aside revealed a narrow opening in the stone wall just large enough for one person to pass through. From somewhere beyond the hidden passage came the unmistakable sound of footsteps moving away in a hurry. Elara slipped into the narrow passage behind the wardrobe, closing the hidden panel just as hurried footsteps echoed through the bridal chamber outside. The tunnel curved beneath the eastern wing before emerging inside a forgotten sewing room where bolts of faded ceremonial fabric still rested on dust-covered shelves. A single lantern burned low beside an unfinished bridal veil stretched across a wooden embroidery frame. Someone had abandoned the work in the middle of a stitch. Elara approached carefully. The veil was not ordinary lace. Tiny silver threads formed intricate patterns that resembled flowers from a distance but revealed themselves as carefully arranged maps when viewed up close. She recognized several palace landmarks woven into the design. One symbol matched the hidden passage she had just used. Another marked the old guardian archive beneath the throne. Near the edge, almost invisible among embroidered vines, a tiny cluster of silver blossoms formed the outline of a remote hunting lodge deep within the western forest. Elara's breath caught. Celeste had hidden a message in plain sight. She had known someone would eventually understand the embroidery. Before Elara could study the pattern further, she discovered a folded journal page tucked beneath the frame. The handwriting belonged unmistakably to her younger sister. It was unfinished, as though interrupted moments before escape. I did not run because I feared the Alpha King. I ran because the peace decree is false. They showed me the original seal beside the forged one. When I refused to stand before the altar, they said the treaty mattered more than the truth. If I disappeared, perhaps they would delay the wedding long enough for someone to find the real documents. The final sentence stopped abruptly, ending with a smear of ink instead of a signature. Elara closed her eyes. Every assumption surrounding Celeste's disappearance quietly collapsed. Her sister had never abandoned her family. She had sacrificed her own reputation to prevent the conspirators from trapping Rowan inside another fraudulent agreement. The missing bride had chosen exile rather than become another forged symbol. Elara carefully folded the page and traced the embroidered flowers again. The Western Hunting Lodge was not simply decoration. It was a destination. Someone had expected Celeste to hide there. Footsteps sounded beyond the sewing room door. Instead of palace guards, Rowan entered alone through another concealed passage, having quietly slipped away while the court remained occupied with endless legal debate. One glance at Elara's face told him everything had changed. She handed him the unfinished letter without a word. Rowan read it once, then lowered the page slowly. Regret crossed his expression. I judged her too quickly, he admitted. Elara nodded toward the embroidered map. She left us more than a letter. Rowan followed her finger until he recognized the tiny stitched lodge hidden among the silver flowers. Before either of them could move, they heard distant horns echoing through the palace above. The trial of truth had ended far sooner than either of them expected, and the court was already calling for the veiled bride to return to the altar. Above the palace, Rowan stood alone before an increasingly impatient court, turning every question into another discussion of ancient law. He challenged the wording of the trial of truth, requested forgotten precedents from royal archivists, and demanded that every diplomatic seal be verified before the ceremony resumed. The debate sounded ceremonial, but every passing minute served one purpose, giving Elara enough time to reach the place hidden inside Celeste's embroidered map. Beneath the chapel, a narrow spiral staircase descended into the oldest foundations of the palace. Elara carried only a lantern and a folded veil tucked beneath her arm. The embroidered flowers had guided her perfectly. At the bottom of the stairs, she found a small sanctuary untouched for generations. Stone wolves circled a silver altar, and beneath their feet ancient ward symbols shimmered with an unsteady light. A faint voice echoed through the chamber. Elara. She spun toward the sound. Behind a translucent barrier of silver energy stood Celeste, pale but unharmed. Her younger sister smiled with exhausted relief. "I knew you would understand the veil." Elara hurried forward until the invisible barrier stopped her hand. "Why didn't you leave the palace?" Celeste shook her head. "I tried. This seal trapped me beneath the chapel after I discovered the forged decree. They wanted everyone to believe I had abandoned the kingdom." She pointed toward the glowing lines crossing the floor. "That is not a prison built to hold me forever. It is meant to keep the truth buried until the false wedding is complete." Elara reached beneath her sleeve and carefully removed the small silver knife. Celeste's eyes widened with recognition. "The guardian blade," she whispered. "It can cut false seals without harming the ancient wards." Elara knelt beside the glowing pattern, searching for the narrow fracture where the forged magic overlapped the original foundation. The blade rested lightly against the stone. She took a steady breath and prepared to make a single precise cut. "Do not force it," Celeste warned softly. "Only the false line." Before the blade touched the glowing mark, footsteps thundered down the staircase. A palace guard burst into the chamber, followed immediately by one of Rowan's senior royal captains. He stopped cold at the sight before him. The veiled substitute bride stood over an ancient seal with a drawn silver knife in her hand. From where he stood, Celeste remained hidden behind the shimmering barrier. The captain saw only what appeared to be an armed woman preparing to strike the sacred foundation beneath the royal chapel. His hand flew to the alarm bell hanging beside the entrance. "Stand away from the ward," he shouted. "Drop the weapon." Elara slowly looked up but did not move the blade. If she obeyed, the false seal would remain intact. If she continued, every witness would believe the Alpha King's veiled bride had attempted to destroy the palace with an assassin's knife. The captain's hand hovered beside the bronze alarm bell. One strike would summon half the palace. "Drop the knife," he ordered again. Elara did not raise the blade toward anyone. Instead, she slowly stepped aside from the glowing seal and met his eyes. "If I wanted to destroy this chamber," she said calmly, "I would have already done it." The captain hesitated only because the silver ward beneath the chapel remained perfectly stable. Rowan arrived seconds later, followed by the High Chancellor and several council members who had abandoned the interrupted ceremony. Their eyes immediately fixed on the knife in Elara's hand and the shimmering seal beneath her feet. One councillor spoke first. "Your Majesty, she has been caught desecrating the royal foundation." Rowan looked only at Elara. "Tell me what you found." The chamber fell silent. He had not asked whether she was guilty. He had asked what she had discovered. Elara pointed toward the thin silver line woven unnaturally across the ancient ward. "This is not part of the original guardian seal. Someone added a false binding over the real one. The blade cuts only forged enchantments." A few skeptical voices laughed quietly, but Celeste's voice suddenly echoed from behind the barrier. "She is telling the truth." Gasps filled the chamber as the hidden prison became visible through the wavering light. Rowan's expression never changed, though relief briefly softened his eyes. Elara knelt once more and carefully placed the silver blade against the narrow artificial seam. Remembering the Guardian journal, she applied almost no force. The knife did not slice through. Ancient stone. It passed effortlessly through the false silver thread layered across the original ward. A clear tone rang through the sanctuary. The added seal dissolved into harmless particles of light while the older guardian symbols beneath it glowed brighter and steadier than before. The invisible barrier surrounding Celeste vanished completely. She stepped forward unharmed and embraced her sister. No explosion followed. No ancient magic collapsed. The chapel simply became quiet, as though something false had finally stopped resisting the truth. Rowan turned toward the gathered court. "You all witnessed it. The sacred ward remains intact." He faced the council without raising his voice. "I trusted Elara before I understood her purpose. I trust her now because the truth has confirmed it." Several nobles exchanged uneasy glances. Supporting her so openly could weaken Rowan's political standing if she had been wrong. He had accepted that risk before seeing the outcome. Celeste reached into the hidden compartment beneath the dissolved seal and withdrew a leather portfolio wrapped in waxed cloth. Inside rested the authentic peace decree beside the forged version. The differences were unmistakable. The counterfeit carried the same distinctive flourish beneath the royal signature that had appeared on the false marriage contract, the altered lineage records, and every fabricated order uncovered over the past years. The High Chancellor slowly closed the forged document. "The same hand created them all," he said quietly. For the first time since the conspiracy began, the architect behind the false decrees no longer had forged documents to hide behind. By sunset the judgment was complete. The authentic peace decree replaced the forged version before every governor, elder, and foreign ambassador gathered inside the Grand Assembly Hall. One after another, official seals were examined, compared, and verified until no reasonable doubt remained. The marriage order binding Rowan to Celeste Vale had never possessed legal authority. It dissolved not with dramatic ceremony but with the quiet certainty of documented truth. The High Chancellor broke the counterfeit seal in full view of the court and announced that no member of House Vale remained bound by the fabricated treaty. A wave of restrained relief moved through the hall. Rowan glanced toward Alara, who had finally lowered the bridal veil from her face. For the first time that day, she stood before the kingdom without disguise. Celeste stepped beside her sister, still pale from the hours spent beneath the hidden chapel but speaking with steady confidence. "There is something both of you deserve to know," she said. Every conversation faded. The people who raised us were not simply caretakers after our parents disappeared. Alara turned slowly. "What do you mean?" Celeste reached into the leather satchel recovered from the hidden sanctuary and removed a weathered wooden pendant carved with a hawk surrounded by crossed branches. Rowan recognized neither symbol, but Alara felt an unexpected chill. She had seen the design somewhere long ago, though the memory remained frustratingly incomplete. "Our guardian kept this hidden," Celeste continued. "The night I found the forged decree, I also found letters explaining who he truly served." She drew a careful breath. "He belonged to an ancient order of hunters." The room grew noticeably quieter. Stories about the old hunter guild survived mostly in forgotten chronicles, describing skilled trackers who once hunted dangerous supernatural threats before vanishing generations earlier. Rowan's attention shifted almost instinctively toward the silver knife resting inside Alara's belt. During the confusion beneath the chapel he had noticed a small engraved mark near its handle but had dismissed it while protecting her. Now he quietly extended his hand. "May I?" Alara removed the blade and passed it to him without hesitation. He turned it beneath the lantern light until the engraving became visible. The same hawk emblem had been etched into the polished silver with extraordinary precision. Rowan looked back at Alara, not accusing, simply searching for understanding. "Why is the hunter's mark on your knife?" She met his eyes without looking away. "I do not know," she answered honestly. "I always believed it belonged to the guardians. The man who raised us told me it was meant to free false seals, nothing more." Rowan believed her immediately, yet the unanswered question settled heavily between them. Before anyone could continue, a palace archivist hurried into the hall carrying a newly recovered bundle of sealed records from the hidden vault. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "we have found additional files concerning Lady Alara's childhood. I think, you should read them before anyone else does." By the following morning, the great hall no longer echoed with arguments but with signatures restoring what the forged decree had nearly destroyed. Representatives from every allied territory placed their seals upon the authentic peace accord, confirming that no marriage would ever again be accepted as proof of loyalty without independent verification. The threat of immediate war quietly dissolved with the counterfeit treaty itself. Outside the palace, the city bells rang not for a royal wedding but for peace preserved without another sacrifice. Celeste stood before the assembled court wearing simple traveling clothes instead of ceremonial silk. For the first time since her disappearance, no one demanded where she belonged. Rowan addressed the chamber with calm authority. Lady Celeste Vale owes this crown nothing beyond the courage she has already shown. He turned toward her with genuine respect. Your future will be chosen by you alone. Celeste smiled through grateful tears, bowed once, and accepted an invitation from the restored Guardian scholars to help uncover the remaining hidden archives instead of returning to political life. Her choice belonged to no treaty except her own. Before dismissing the assembly, Rowan looked across the gathered nobles, diplomats, and governors. His voice remained steady enough that no one mistook it for emotion alone. Let this also be remembered. I will never marry because fear, law, or politics demand it. If I ever stand beside someone again, it will be because she freely chooses to stand beside me. The declaration settled over the hall with surprising quiet. No proclamation of power carried greater weight than a promise limiting it. Hours later, after the palace had finally grown still, Elara found Rowan inside the old Guardian library where the recovered evidence had been secured. The silver knife rested between them upon an ancient wooden table. Neither reached for it immediately. Rowan simply studied its worn handle beneath the lantern light. Whatever its origin, he said quietly, it saved lives today. Elara nodded, then noticed a hairline seam running along the knife's grip that she had never seen before. Curious, she pressed lightly against the carved hawk emblem. A hidden compartment clicked open inside the handle. A tightly rolled strip of yellowed parchment slipped into her hand. Neither spoke while she carefully unfolded it. The faded ink revealed an official hunter commission bearing the same ancient hawk crest they had uncovered earlier that day. Beneath it was a remarkably accurate charcoal portrait of a much younger Rowan, drawn before he had ever worn the Alpha King's crown. Across the bottom, one sentence had been written in firm, deliberate script. Target before coronation. Elara felt every memory she could not explain begin fitting together with frightening clarity. She lowered the parchment slowly, unable to hide the truth any longer. Rowan met her eyes without accusation, only quiet expectation. After a long silence, Elara finally whispered, "Before I remembered who I truly was. I was sent here to kill you."